Great. So welcome everybody to the Jumpstart Your Resilient Homestead Workshop. I'm so excited you made it live for this workshop. And I promise it'll be very generative for you in terms of if you have a site yourself and kind of walking you through some of the process. So pat yourselves on the back that you've made this time, that you've put away the distractions of, for those of us in the US, the elections and everything that's going on, and you're dedicating this time just to think about and dream and plan for your homestead. So we've done a few introductions. We have some people coming in. We have some people coming in from East Tennessee, from Montana, from Ontario, um, and let's see, and where else? Oh, Bainbridge Island as well, near Seattle. So across the North America. And for those who have just joined, if you wanted to put in the chat where you're coming from, that's always fun for people to hear. And what's great about what I'm going to be teaching this evening is that, of course, all of these concepts will apply to any of your sites. And so that's what's so powerful about permaculture, and that's what's so powerful about this design process. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. And if you all can just let me know whether you see my screen or not, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Let me just see. I am screen sharing. Seems like. Let me just see. Oh, we have somebody joining from Colorado too. So can everybody see the screen? Maybe a thumbs up in the chat. Oh, let's see. Screen sharing is paused. Let me just try that again, just to make sure. I mean, you'd think I've been doing this forever, but we're just gonna make sure. I promise. There we go. Can people see that screen? Just a quick. Excellent. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. So just what to expect for this evening. This is going to be about an hour, hour and 15, depending on questions and participation. But we did a little bit of an introduction. I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know. And then I'm going to step you through the Resilient Homestead Roadmap. And then you're going to get a sneak peek into my Resilient Homestead program, and then we'll have time for Q&A. And the important thing is, too, that there is an opportunity for work time. So as I ask these questions, as I go through this roadmap, you're going to have time to actually respond to questions that will step you and jumpstart kind of your design process. But before we start, it just occurred to me, does everybody have the workbook? It's not necessary, but might be helpful. And maybe if there's somebody that doesn't, or I might go ahead and let's see, do people, okay, Bree has the workbook. I'm hoping that everybody does. If you don't, just kind of put that in the chat real quick. Let me see. I got it. Okay, got it. And Carla has it. I did include it in the email. So hopefully, just go back to your email and you can download that workbook to follow along. Again, it's not necessary. You can do it from your notebook as well. So just a little bit, I want to start usually some of my presentations just to know, for those of you who don't know me, the reason why I do the work that I do, that I love teaching people how to grow more of their own food, how to grow more of their own medicine, how to be more self-reliant. But my why as to why I do this is because of this beautiful planet that we live on, and the biological diversity that is on this planet, and the wilderness and wild animals that we have. And so just yesterday, these two bull moose were just down the road from where I live. And it was, on the one hand, it was amazing to see them in the neighborhood, but on the other hand, they were right near a busy road. And I just believe that the more that we can, as humans, contribute to building more wild places, contribute to increasing biodiversity on our little pieces of the planet, the more that we can benefit the overall ecosystem. So I live in Bozeman, Montana, for those of you who don't know, where we do get these wild animals and the privilege of seeing these wild animals, but we also know that humans have had an impact. And I think that we hear oftentimes about the bad things that we do as human beings, but there are so many opportunities to have a regenerative and positive footprint on the planet. And that's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do. And I likely, and I'll hear from some of you in terms of what your goals are for your site plans, but that's likely probably part of why you do what you do as well, or why you're here this evening. So a little bit about my experience. I have 18 years of gardening in cold climates, 14 years teaching gardening and permaculture and sustainability. I've been consulting with clients for 14 years, 11 years establishing my own homestead. And I've studied with various people that are fairly well known in the permaculture movement, like Jeff Lawton, Rosemary Morrow, Dave Jackie, and Sepp Holzer. And I've taught with both Penny Livingston Stark and Jerome Ozentowski. And I'm on the faculty of both the Green Path Herb School, which is out of Missoula, Montana, and the Permaculture Women's Guild Permaculture Design course as well. I also teach for the Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute too. So have been in this space for quite a while. And I work with individuals like yourselves. I would imagine couples who are new to a site and don't know where to start with their designs, people who have been longtime gardeners but maybe need a refresh or new ideas on what they're doing on their site, just people across the spectrum of mostly people who want to grow more food, more habitat, more pollinator species. Just I love the clients who I work with because they're always good people wanting to contribute to a better, more positive world. Uh, and I like to start out, what this workshop is called Jumpstart Your Resilient Homestead. And I think part of resilience in permaculture and in our lives, right, is tapping into our roots and knowing where we come from. Just like a tree, the deeper the roots, right, the wider the roots, the more robust that tree is, the more resilient it is to adverse conditions. And so I call in my great grandmother Nellie Cruz in the top left hand corner, who had a small farm. It wasn't super productive. The land wasn't super productive. So she grew turkeys. She also had a few dairy cows and she would sell cream. I call in my grandmother, Margaret Irby, on the bottom left, who had a garden and raised 6 kids during World War II, and canned and preserved and made things from scratch while taking care of her kids. My grandmother Lau on the top right, who was born in Malaysia and moved to Singapore and lived through the Japanese occupation of Singapore, and had 3 kids, and they lived in a 1 bedroom kind of compound during the Japanese occupation. And then, of course, my mom, Daisy, who was an immigrant, came as an immigrant to Canada, searching for a better life. There wasn't a lot of opportunity in Singapore for her to do things that she did, but came new to Canada and had to figure out the culture, the weather, and everything involved there. So I call in these ancestors because they're fundamental to who I am. My grandmother and great grandmother on my paternal side were gardeners and farmers, and on my mom's side, I have teachers. And so it's kind of, not surprising that I've become a teacher of gardening and of permaculture. So I suspect that many of you, and maybe you want to put this in the chat, whether many of you have grandparents or parents or great grandparents who were either farmers or gardeners. And a lot of us have lost that connection, right? I didn't learn gardening from my grandmother or my mom, who also had a garden. I had to go and learn from somebody like myself, right? And had to experiment in my own garden. And so I think when people reconnect to growing food, right, they're reconnecting oftentimes to to their ancestors. So I just encourage you all to kind of call in who it is in your life, who's kind of made you who you are. And it may not be a person, right? It may be the beings, the non-human beings in this world that have contributed to who you are. So for those of you who don't know, I live on a 3/4 acre lot. It's a suburban lot, but it's 3/4 of an acre, so it's rather big uh, in Bozeman, Montana. In the US, we have a pond, we have a greenhouse, we have annual gardens, we have a food forest of fruit trees and berry bushes that provides us with a good portion of our fruit. These are some of the yields that we get from that food forest. Um, and we have chickens, and my husband is also a hunter. So in Montana, culturally, we have a lot of hunting here. So we have usually venison or elk, sometimes antelope if we're lucky. And so with the meat that is provided by my husband hunting and the veggies and the fruit that we have off of the site that we manage to grow a good portion of our own food. And it's a lot of work, as many of you probably know, but it's very, very rewarding. Oh, and here I want to just see Angie says great grandfather, grandfather, father, coffee and sugarcane. Yeah, in terms of their growing. So you have that in your roots. And Carla says my mother was a gardener and a teacher, a big influence for me. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that's so great. Um, so what I said at the beginning in terms of what I'm going to teach you tonight is going to be applicable to any place that you're at, everyone that's participating, but it's also applicable in terms of scale. So this design process can be applied to a large scale acreage if you have that, a suburban lot, or even an urban environment, right? These principles are the same and this design process is the same. And that's what's so powerful about it. So I also wanted to say, we're going to be talking about a little bit about permaculture, and this quote by Bill Mollison, one of the co-originators of permaculture: though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And some of those solutions are to grow our own food and to bolster local food economies and to be participating in them. And so I'm so glad you've all joined me today to do that, or to start that process, or to continue that process if you've already been in it. Um, so a lot of you who have said who you are and where you're from, but what I'd love for you to share in the chat is, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to your homestead? Whether it's, starting out, or what you might be dealing with right now. I'd love to hear in the chat what your biggest challenges are. And if you don't want to write it out and you just want to share it out, that is totally fine too. But what's your biggest challenge? Like, why did you come here tonight? What attracted you to this workshop? And hopefully I can help you. I'll just give you a couple minutes if anybody wants to share biggest challenge. Oftentimes people come to me because they're overwhelmed. Um, they don't know where to start. Um, let's see, what to do first. So Carla is saying, what to do first and how to integrate all the pieces. That's great. Yes, that's a huge part. I find that sometimes clients come to me and they've put in things in different places and it's a bit hodgepodge, and they don't know how to integrate it all. So it's kind of like a segregated homestead where things aren't working together. Um, Angie says, first time in Tennessee, I was in a zone 11, and now you're in a zone 6, 7. Yeah. So I want to adapt in this weather and organize myself. So that's great too, Angie. Like, again, somebody, oftentimes clients of mine will have recently moved here and they're like, I used to grow in California. Now what do I do in Montana? So yes, adapting to a different type of site. Randy says, maximizing space. I have poor soil quality here. Great. So, if you do have limited space, how do you use that space? And yeah, soil, huge issue in terms of that's kind of the foundation of our site. And if we're wanting to grow stuff, we have to get that right. Ooh, I love all of this. Flora says water is our biggest challenge. Yeah. Well water is extremely salty. We have a reservoir, but it depends on rain and snowfall to fill. Soil is hard clay. Winter is long and bitter. I hear ya. I hear you, Flora. So lots of challenges there. Yeah, water, big issue. Water and soil, right? Those are really big issues, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. Missy says, my biggest challenge is that my garden is too big for me. Oh, yes, I love this. 100 by 140 fenced, and you're 62 and find getting very tired of keeping it all tended. Yes, great. Yeah. Love that, because what we'll talk about a little bit in this course, right, is that your site, just like you, are a dynamic system, right? So some of you, I've worked with clients who have young kids, right? So their implementation and what they do is going to look a lot different than if you have plenty of time on your hands or you're recently retired. But if you're moving and you're aging and you're like, oh, this seems like it's too large a scale for me right now, then yeah, you might want to simplify, right? Simplify to amplify. Love that. Thank you all for sharing. That's very helpful. So you got your workbook, I heard. Grab your notebook and a pen. Let's get started. So let's talk first. I want to get clear on a definition, right? When I say jumpstart your resilient homestead, what do I mean by that? I mean that your homestead is a site that's designed using permaculture principles, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. An environment that creates beneficial connections between plants, animals, and people, a landscape that's able to respond to adverse conditions. And basically, when I talk about site planning, right, and about a vision and a goal, right, it's about life design, right? A life that can adapt easily to change. So when I think, was it Missy, you said that you're 62, now you're having to adapt, right? You're having to change maybe what your goals might be for your site. And that's something that happens to all of us, right? In terms of what's the best way forward. So for those of you who don't know what permaculture is, just to set the stage so we're all on the same page, permaculture stands for permanent agriculture or permanent culture, and it's a design approach for sustainable living and land use. And many of what I'm going to talk about tonight, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight derives from permaculture. Another way of looking at it is the harmonious integration of landscape and people that provides food, energy, shelter, and other needs in a sustainable way. So I'm going to take you through this roadmap. Again, a lot of this influenced by permaculture, but we start right at the bottom here with clarifying our goals. So the acronym for this is CODE. Clarify your goals, observe yourself and your site, design on paper, and then execute, enhance your skills, and evaluate. So I'm going to take you through these steps, and you have your workbook to follow along. So the first thing, so again, here's the acronym. The first thing that I want you to do and what we're going to spend time on is clarifying your goals. So Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So knowing what the goals are for your site is fundamental to the success of your site, and it acts as a rudder for every decision that you make. So oftentimes people, and this is how you end up with kind of a hodgepodge site, right? Is they're like, oh, I want a greenhouse and I want a garden and maybe a pond, right? But I want you to back up before you kind of consider all of the different elements of your site. I want you to back up and ask yourself, what do you want your landscape to do for you? What's your big picture vision? right? This is where I talk about this whole process as life design. What do you hope to achieve on your site? Is it quality of life? Is it food production? Is it financial stability? Um, and then I want you to craft a statement of purpose for your project that reflects the whole of your future system. Why is it that you want to establish a homestead, right? Or a garden? Or what do you want to do with your yard? And so, as an example for us, right, my statement of purpose for our site is we're a cold climate permaculture demonstration site that inspires and educates people about how to grow their own food while at the same time affording a level of self-reliance for myself and my family, right? So early on, when I was establishing my homestead and it was like, well, should I fence it? Because we're in kind of a wildlife corridor. There's a lot of deer. You saw the moose, right? There's a lot of deer and sometimes moose in our neighborhood. Should I put the time and energy and the budget into a fence? Well, yeah, if I want to have a demonstration site that people that can see, then that's worth the investment. Should I have a greenhouse? Well, yes, if I'm trying to be a cold climate demonstration site, and greenhouses are a season extension technique that's fundamental to growing in cold climates, right? So for you, it's to understand what your goals are, and they're going to inform the decisions that you make. Um, and I've had clients come to me, how big should my garden be? Well, I don't know, what are your goals? Do you want to be as self-reliant as possible? Or do you just want summer season vegetables? Or do you just want an experience for your children to have in the garden? So again, those goals are going to determine how the scale and scope of your project, because a landscape can be 1,000 different things, right? I can look at a site and I can imagine, at least in the moment, 10 or 12 different ways to design that site. But it's going to depend on the client, you, in terms of what you want, in terms of how we're going to do that. So, what I want us to do now is for you to take 5 minutes to answer these questions that we just went over. So, what's your big picture vision for your site? What do you hope to achieve? Some of it might be, is it an educational place for people, right? Is it a place of gathering? So, and to start with crafting a statement of purpose. Obviously, it's going to probably take you more than 5 minutes to craft that statement of purpose. But at least this is the beginning of what you can be starting to think about. So I want you to take 5 minutes to do that and let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to put those in the chat. Maybe I'll start a little bit of music. So we just had somebody join. If you're just joining, we're just answering these questions, writing these down in our notebook. So yeah, if people, Angie already put something in the chat, and if people are willing to share some of your statements of purpose and or what your big picture vision is, even if it's just bullet points, I'd love to hear it. But Angie said finances, financial stability, and health were a big part of it, and that's great. You know that one of the fundamental reasons is that you want to be eating healthy, organic, locally based food, and that when you say financial, Angie, do you mean that you want your site to you want to derive an income from your site? And maybe if you can answer that, that would be great. Because of course that looks a lot different too, right? If people are growing to sell, that's going to have a different design than growing just for your own purposes. So if people want to start sharing that in the chat or just sharing it out, of course, that would be fabulous. It's always good to get kind of this cross fertilization of ideas. In terms of, maybe somebody might mention something that you're like, "Oh, yeah, I also want, that as part of my goal." So Angie says, "Yes, and save some money from groceries." Yes. "I wanna do a micro bakery fresh market." Amazing. I love that idea. Yeah, I mean, saving money is huge. 1 year I kind of counted, I went 6 months without having to buy fresh fruit, and probably at least the same amount for not having to buy fresh vegetables. And when you consider fresh vegetables and fruit are very expensive, they can be, especially if they're organic and local. And so you can save a ton of money that way by bypassing the produce section. I love that I basically bypass the produce section. Every once in a while, I'll buy, say, a lime or something, or some ginger or something. But for the most part, I'm bypassing it for a good portion of the growing season. Randy says you're not wanting to eat food from the grocery stores. Great. So you're looking for like massive self-reliance. The quality is getting poorer. Everything is full of pesticides and the prices are outrageous. Yes, exactly. Just what I said. And I hear you. That's a huge part of what people are looking for, more food security, and then they know where their produce is coming from. Yeah, I love it. Grow healthy local food for ourselves and friends. Love that, Missy. Yeah, again, being able to share your surplus. I think, skilling up more and more people to be able to grow their own food. Again, getting back to what I said in the introduction, and these are things that our ancestors, that our grandparents or great grandparents just knew how to do. Right. And we are losing a lot of those skills. I mean, we're starting to regain them, but the more people that know how to grow food, right, the better off we're just going to be as a community. So love those ideas. I don't know if anyone else wants to share anything, but if you do, just pop it in the chat, but I'll continue going with the workshop. So you got code, right? Clarify your goals. That's the first part of your roadmap. So, I'm hearing from most of you, right? You want to produce fresh and healthy food for yourself and your family and possibly your community. Um, and you want to save some money in the process. So those are great goals. Oh, and Bree said increase the quality of life with local food. Build habitat for wildlife. Yeah, wildlife habitat is awesome. Reduce my waste and reuse what I can. Create a space to decompress from work. Love it. So I think that's also kind of, getting to the essence of why we're also doing some of this work, right? Is to have the ability to have the natural world, right, in creating this beautiful garden, right? It feeds us both in food, but also it feeds us in intangible ways, right? In terms of the benefits that it brings, the calmness that it brings in being out in the garden and in connecting with the natural world. Carla says healthy local food to share with family and friends, bird and butterfly habitat, extension of indoor living space. Yes, love it. Water catchment systems, love the homegrown national park concept. Yes, agree with you, Carla. So for those of you who don't know about the Homegrown National Park, this is something that was started by Doug Tallamy. Definitely Google it. It's about everyone creating their own and increasing the native plants on their site to increase biodiversity and to bolster kind of habitat and food for native birds. Buddy says to be productive and serve as a teaching platform for future generations in a small way. Love it. Yes, exactly. I think we need people doing this as examples to their family and friends. We also need people doing this so they can demonstrate to other people for other people to be able to do this. And that's that ripple effect that happens and why I love the work that I do, right? You skill up some people, they start the process, they get to know their site, they teach their neighbors and their friends, and that's how we kind of do the ripple effect of positive, positive spiral upwards. I think as a society, oftentimes right now, we're kind of in this negative spiral downwards, right? Of divisiveness and this is what we're doing wrong and these people over there we don't agree with, rather than like everybody can agree that fresh local food is really important, right? And that it's really healthy and that it's helpful, right? And gardens can be such a place for therapy and mental health and all of the things, right? And so I think this is something that we can all agree on. So thank you all for sharing. So again, that's clarifying your goals, really, right? So when you have to make a decision in terms of the time you want to spend or the money that you need to spend or even the different things that you want on your site, you just come back to your goals, right? In terms of if somebody says to me, I want summer seasonal vegetables and to have my kids have the experience of growing food, then I'd say, well, you probably don't need a greenhouse, right? You don't have to make that investment in a greenhouse or that investment in a big fence around your yard, right? But if you're looking at doing something like what Buddy said, where I want this to be a teaching platform, then that's a bigger goal, right? The scope of that is bigger. So let's go on to O, right? In code, observe yourself and your site. So this is a big one. These are big questions that I need you to answer. How much time do you have to dedicate to your homestead on a daily and weekly basis? So again, like I said, your site can be 1,000 different things. But if you have only 2 hours a week, or if you have 20 hours a week to dedicate to your site, those site plans, right, are going to look a lot different. So be really clear on that. What sort of budget do you have to work with? Do you have some money up front that you can use? Or do you have, some money over every season that you're willing to put in? So that's also going to determine, right, some of the decisions that you make. I have some clients who have maybe they have $2,000, maybe they have $20,000, right? But depending on your site. So oftentimes having less capital is better, and so that you can grow into your garden. And so that's kind of what we did on our site, right? We didn't have a huge amount of capital to start with, but we were able to put a little bit in every year. And then the third question to answer is who will be helping you with implementation, maintenance, harvest, and preservation? So one of the things that people underestimate is all of the time that it takes, especially for preservation. If you have a root cellar, great, right? If you have some place to store it. But if you have, I was deep in apples and tomatoes last week, right? Like making salsa, making, applesauce, apple juice, apple muffins, right? Apple bars, right? Just so that you don't lose that harvest. And people don't understand, right? Because we might not have grown up with it, how much time it actually takes. So be very clear about that. Now, there are ways that you can get help with that, right? With harvesting your apples and then gifting some to your friends, or doing preservation parties or something like that. But important to understand from the beginning, right? This observation piece of observing how much time you actually have. So I want us to take another 5 minutes to answer those questions. How much time do you have on a daily or weekly basis? And of course, that might change over the growing season, right? And you might be able to adapt depending on knowing that planting season is really busy, right? And harvest season is really busy. But in between when things are growing, you don't have as much, you don't need as much time. So let's take just a few minutes to uh, answer those questions. So like before, if anyone wants to share their responses, that would be great. Randy says, learning food preservation is a big part of the process I need to focus on. I'm just beginning to learn many of the old methods, and a freeze dryer is too expensive for me at the moment. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah. There's a there's a great food dehydrator called the Excalibur, and it is very pricey. I have a friend who has one that I borrow oftentimes. But yes, I oftentimes just freeze a lot of my stuff because we already have two chest freezers for wild game meat. And so we dedicate one mostly to vegetables and then one to the game meat. And it's an easy way to preserve. But there's so many. Fermentation is big, and then dehydration is also big. But yes, it's a whole skill, right? And these are skills that we've we've lost in a lot of ways. All right. So if anyone wants to share any other, how much time you're gonna spend on a daily or weekly basis, or who might be helping, or what sort of budget you have to work with, I love to hear your responses. So we'll move on to observing. So we have code, right? Clarify your goals. O, observe yourself, and then observe your site. So there are so many different patterns on your site in terms of where does the snow collect? Where do the leaves collect? Um, where, what kind of patterns do you see? What's the prevailing wind, right? All of that stuff is fundamental to your site design. So, um, what you wanna do is look at microclimates, especially if you're in a cold climate. What are those warm microclimates that you need? If you're in a hotter climate, sometimes it's what are those cooler microclimates. You wanna look on your site at the sun and shade patterns, right? Understanding that fruit trees, most berry bushes, most of your garden needs about 8 hours of sunlight a day. That's the definition of kind of full sun, right? There are, of course, some greens and cool season crops that don't need as much sun, but for the most part, in terms of citing certain things that you're going to grow, you need to know what the sun and shade patterns are on your site. Do you have slope? So that's something to keep in mind, right? In terms of, can you take advantage of that slope in some way? Um, and have it work for you in terms of collecting water above and running it down slope, right? And making an assessment of that. What are the water and wind patterns? What existing resources might you have on site, right? Do you have rocks? Do you have a lot of deciduous trees? So you have a lot of leaves. Do you have leftover whatever wood that the previous person left, or fencing that the previous person left, all of those different things. Um, or even existing resources like, do you have a truck that's going to help you transport a lot of these materials? And then do you have wildlife that moves in and around your site? And then also, like, how do you move around your site? There's your patterns, there's the natural world and its patterns, but there's also, how do you like interacting with your backyard and with your space? Are there places probably that you never go, right? And are there places that you love to hang out? And that's important to understand, right? And that's important to design for, because you don't want to plant something in a place that you never go, because then you won't ever maintain it, right? If you don't go there, I like to say, you won't go there. That's just how it is. That's how your pattern is as a person. So that's really important. So I want to address, yeah, some people have shared. So Flora said 2 to 3 hours a day and about $2,000 over the year. Awesome. So you can dedicate 2 to 3 hours a day on your garden or site. That's huge. That's a huge amount of time. And having $2,000 over the year, that's a great start. That's actually a really that's a spacious amount of capital to begin with. And because you have all that time in terms of labor, that's fantastic. So for Flora, depending on what her goals are, I would say, oh, you could have this, the scope and the scale of your site can be a little bigger. Angie says, I need a system that can help me to get things easier. 2 hours per day, no help, right? So in that case too, understanding, okay, if it's just you, right, then you have to design a social system too, because I always like to remind people, agriculture was never meant to be a solitary act, right? It was done in community. It was done in tribes, right? It was done in villages. And so we in this society that we live in, that's quite individualistic, right? And we run the risk, right, of burning ourselves out and in beating ourselves up, because we think that, oh my gosh, I want to grow all of my own food, why can't I do this? Well, you can't do it because you need help, right? Because it's impossible to do on your own, because a lot of the stuff was done in community. However, if it is just you, right, you can set up automated systems that will help you. And by that, I mean automatic irrigation is huge, right? That will make things easier. But you can also have social systems, right? Part of food, right, is relational, right? And so you can invite people over for a work party. They help you plant. They get some of your harvest, right? A lot of those barter and exchange situations, looking at the garden as the great connector, right? Of people, of making connections with people. So, not only thinking that you have to do it all alone, and all of, again, the intangible benefits that come from that. So, one thing that I want to make clear is that you shouldn't, you know, think that you can do it all alone. Bring in your neighbors, bring in your friends if you have them to make it more of a generative experience in terms of growing food. So, Carla says 10 to 20 hours a week, seasonal adjustments during planting and harvest. Budget 500 to 800 a year, up to 2,000 to cover large one-time expenses. Great. Implementation, 3 adults in a household with occasional help, participation of friends. Fantastic, right? So you have some social systems in there of 3 adults being able to help. You're very clear on what your budget is. And that 10 to 20 hours a week, that's fantastic in terms of a really good foundational start. Awesome. And Angie says that's a great idea. Yeah, people, it used to be that if we liked our neighbors, we asked them for help. And now it's that if we like them, we leave them alone. And I think we need to, we have to shift culture again on that front of asking for help, and in so doing, right, creating a culture again around growing food. So next part of the Resilient Homestead Roadmap is to design on paper, right? So what does that mean? It means that you want to create a base map. And what a base map is that you are putting everything on your site that's existing. All right. So oftentimes you'll create a base map, just you can do it from Google Maps, and download and make a bit of a site plan like this one, right? Based on the house, right? So you want to make sure you have your house, the driveway, right? The garage. If you're on a well and septic, it's really important to know where that septic drain field is, because you can't really grow anything over the septic drain field. Um, so getting a base map is super important, and a base map that's to scale, right? And what I mean by that is, okay, this on this map, this length here is 20 feet, right? Or 25 feet. So that just helps you in determining how many trees and shrubs can you fit? How many garden beds can you fit, right? So all of that's super important. So creating this base map that has all of your critical site features and existing buildings and irrigation and existing trees or garden beds, walkways, any of that kind of stuff. Super important to do that. It doesn't have to be super, it has to be somewhat accurate in terms of the scale, but it doesn't have to be, super detailed. But oftentimes, if you have a new build, you'll have these architectural drawings, right? Or you might be able to get that from the plat map that's already existing. So lots of different ways to get a site, a base map. Then what you want to do with that base map is you also want to do a sector analysis of your site. This is what is called a sector analysis in permaculture. So you understand that if your site is here, right, and your house is there are all sorts of different energies that are influencing your site. There's winter winds, there's prevailing winds, there might be a storm sector, there's a winter sun sector if you're in the north, right? When the sun tracks really low. There's a summer sun sector when it tracks higher during the summer. There might be scenic views, right? There might be not so great views. There might be neighbors that you love. There might be neighbors that you don't like so much, so you need some privacy, right? So all of those things play into what is going to happen on your site. So sometimes clients will come to me and say, "Hey, I have a total blank slate, right? I don't know what to do." But if you look at, they might be energies that you're not necessarily seeing, right? But if you look at a flat site has influences, right, that will determine where you might put what, right? So obviously, you're going to want to put your garden somewhere where the summer and winter sun sector, right, and is part of that area, right? But you don't want to put fruit trees over here if there's a scenic view, right? Because you don't want to block them. Um, but if there's some pollution here, right, you might want to put some kind of hedge to prevent that pollution from coming onto your site. And then if you have winter winds or summer breezes, do you want to deflect that energy away from your site, or do you want to put a wind turbine there? Right. So those are questions of, do you want to channel that energy towards your site, or do you want to channel it away from your site? And that's going to determine what you put on your site and where. Um, the other thing that you want to do on your site is a zone analysis. So you have your sector analysis of all of the different energies, and then you have a zone analysis. And this comes again from the permaculture concept, where we care for and maintain what we see on a daily basis. So in your zone one, which is immediately probably around your house, you're going to have your herbs and your kitchen garden, maybe your compost pile, most structures, and a greenhouse. That's going to be pretty close into your house, right? Um, Provided that the sun is available closer into your house. Again, that saves you. When I talked about this workshop, right, I was saying that I'm going to put you through a roadmap that saves you time, energy, and money, right? So this is going to save you time in terms of where you put things on your site, and energy. Zone 2 is a little farther out. That's for weekly use and maintenance, where you don't have to go there every day, right? Your fruit trees are oftentimes out here. Your winter storage crops, right? So things like onions and potatoes and corn, right? Things that have to grow all season, right? You don't have to check on them every day. Whereas sometimes in a cold climate, tomatoes or especially lettuces, right? Herbs, um, other greens that you might have, you're probably using those every day in your cooking, right? But for a lot of the winter storage crops, if they're on irrigation, if you need irrigation where you live, right, they will grow all season before you need to look at them, or before you, I mean, you need to look at them weekly maybe, but you don't need to look at them daily. Same with fruit trees, right? You don't have to look at a fruit tree every day to make sure that it's growing, right? And that it's doing well. That can be a weekly thing. So our food forest is out in zone 2, whereas my peppers and greens and herbs are more right outside my back door, right near close to the deck. Zone 3 is if you have acreage, right? And you have grazing animals, or you'd have forage crops out there. Zone 4 is where you'd be growing timber crops. Potentially, again, if you're looking for maximum self-reliance and you're off grid, right? Then you would be maybe growing crops for wood that you might be using to heat your home. And then zone 5 is the wilderness area, right? And even if you have an urban or a suburban lot, you might have a zone 5, right? It's that lilac hedge or the green ash tree or the spruce tree, right? Things that are wildlife habitat. And, Bree, I think, mentioned she wanted to enhance. So how can you enhance the wildlife habitat that you already have, right? So you can kind of contribute to growing part of zone 5, right? But also, if you have large scale acreage, right, that's where you're allowing wildlife corridors and connectivity, right? The larger ecosystem to exist around you and enhance your site. So that's observe your site. And then the last part of the roadmap is to execute, enhance your skills, and evaluate. So one of the things that I need to underscore to people is that depending on the scale and scope of your design, right, this is a multi-year implementation. Oftentimes people think that it's going to take them just 2 years to do this big plan, right? But usually, what I see with most of my clients is you're looking at a 3 to 5 to 7 year plan, depending on the scale and the scope of your project. And what I recommend you do um, is you map out, right? Once you have a site plan on paper, then you map out what are you going to do in spring, summer, fall 2025, spring, summer, fall 2026, 2027, and so on, depending on how long your implementation plan is. Because what that does is it decreases the mental energy that you're spending being like, "Oh, right, I gotta put in a chicken coop. When is that gonna happen?" It kind of distracts you from the tasks at hand in terms of how you're building, and implementing your site plan. So, take the opportunity to enhance your skills every growing season, right? As many of you know, you're going to be learning along the way and accepting the feedback as you implement. And then you evaluate what's working and what isn't in your design. And this is where taking things small and slow is usually what I recommend, because that way you can grow into your garden, is what I like to say, right? Is understanding how much maintenance and care this takes, right? So, do I have the time and the energy to enhance this by, this much next year, right? And so that's really important, is that constant feedback loop that you're getting in terms of evaluating what isn't working and making adjustments. And understanding that your site plan is dynamic and will change as you begin implementing elements of your design, right? So it could be that your goals change, right? And like we were talking about earlier, right? As your family changes, as your situation changes, as you get older, right? You might want to revisit those goals, right? And that's part of always reimagining. Just like a natural system is constantly in flux, right? Is constantly changing, we are as well, and your site plan is as well. So that's kind of the Resilient Homestead Roadmap of what you want to do. You want to clarify those goals, observe yourself and your site, design on paper with that zone and sector analysis, and then you want to evaluate as you're implementing, and execute the plan, so to speak. So I'd love to hear any takeaways that you have from just that part of the workshop. And I'd love to have them type them in the chat. And then Flora mentioned here that you go from zone 1 straight to zone 5. Yeah, interesting. And that oftentimes happens too, right? And it might be nice that you have zone 5 close, right? In terms of wilderness. I don't know what the scale of your site is, and feel free to share that. But that can often happen too. They're represented, the zones are represented as concentric circles, but they might not necessarily be, because right outside your house, you might have a slope that goes downhill, right, into a forested area. And that would be a zone 5, right there, even though it's right close into your house. So would love to hear some takeaways from that. And then we will have time for questions too. Um, okay, I'll continue going. One of the big takeaways that I want you to take from this is, um, that your vision and your goals for your site are, the most important thing, in my opinion. Um, if you walk away with anything out of this, is just kind of stay true and get clear on your vision. And more importantly, if you have other people on your site, if you live with other people on your site, like Carla said, there are 3 people living on her site, you want to come to a consensus on what your vision is, right? Because oftentimes, if you don't, you might think that you have the same vision, but you might not, right? And so it gives you an opportunity to be kind of understand, oh yeah, this is what we want to create, right? And that's really fundamental. And just wanted to share this quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who says, "We restore the land and the land restores us." Again, this whole idea that we are in relationship with our sites and with our land. Um, and uh, and and so that's fundamental, right? That whole dynamic relationship that we have with the land, and how all of those intangible benefits that come with it. Um, oh, thanks, Angie. I'm glad that this helped you. So what's your next best step? That's one thing that I'd love to hear from people in terms of what they what what you think you want to do next with this information. You all kind of took the time out this evening to dedicate to thinking more about your site plan and your process. Missy says, oh, Carla says first, or Angie said, "I love everything. A friend of mine shared your class and you have more clarity and it was a great update. Thank you." And Carla says, "Interesting that the zones can be flexible and mixed up on a site." Yes. Um, and Missy says, "I liked what you reminded us that a garden is a place that nurtures mental health. Mine has been a place of refuge and meditation. My challenge is figuring out how to share it in order to collect the social community to help out." Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big part. And actually, one of my students that took the Resilient Homestead program, she came in being like, "I'm all alone doing this." And she has since done these community farm days and really brought people together around food. And so I highly encourage you to do that. And that's a good segue. As you know, I wanted to give people a sneak peek into this my Resilient Homestead program. Again, no pressure to join, but if you are interested in really getting a site plan on paper and a clear understanding of what you have to do next, this might be a really good fit for you. So, for those of you who don't know, the Resilient Homestead program is a 4-month experience. It has one-on-one and group elements, and it's online. We meet on Zoom every couple weeks where I give you content and then I give you homework, right, for your site planning process. I take you through that roadmap, but in far more detail. And then I draw on whole systems design, my work with clients, etc., to basically translate your vision into a concrete plan. And just like Randy said in here, he shared having a drawn up site plan as his takeaway helps a lot. It helps tremendously. And he said, "I started this year planting a couple trees, which I realized after I could have optimized my space a little better." That's what happens. And that's why people often come to me after they've made mistakes. So that's where doing something like this, doing a site plan saves you time, energy, and money, where you're not redoing things that you've done or investing in plants and materials that then die, right? Or that you have to put somewhere else, right? So having that site plan is really fundamental. So again, this program allows you to get a clear plan together and the steps that you're going to take in terms of implementation, gives you the knowledge and the confidence and identifying the priorities and feeling confident that the money that you're spending is a good use of resources, which is also a lot of the problems, right? Where you are spending time and money doing things that you're not sure that you should be doing. Whereas if you're going through this program, right, and getting the mentorship from me and the guidance, then oftentimes you know, okay, this is a good decision to make to invest this money in a greenhouse or a fence or these seeds or these plants. Yeah. Um, just in terms of what's included in this program, it's 8. It ended up being I do a bonus. There are 9 2-hour sessions. There's the whole community of like-minded people that are going through this process with you, that are in the same boat in terms of wanting to come up with a site plan. Then you do get some one-on-one time with me. You get 2 sessions where we're specifically, looking at your site. And then you're getting this site plan at the end. It's kind of a co-created map between the two of us to give you this kind of jump start to implementation. So usually if and clients do come to me to just do a site plan for them without, all of this content and knowledge, usually that's anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 if you just do that directly with me and don't do this whole program. So bonuses are a site planning work session that we'll do both online and in person for people who are local. And then I have guest experts come in. And as a group, you vote on the top three topics. So we've had people come in and talk about greenhouse growing and design, fruit tree maintenance and care, beekeeping, medicinal plants. So I have about 12 topics for you to choose from, and then we choose the top three as a group, and those guest experts come in. You're able to ask them questions as well. Um, and just wanted to let share with you some of the testimonials, and highlight some of the reasons why people come to this program. Um, Derek came a few years ago and he put in, after going through the program, he put in a hoop house, a chicken coop, 2 raised beds, right? So I think people get this confidence just to immediately start implementation. Um, Karen, it was all about, I feel overwhelmed and not sure what to do, and now I'm ready. And so that's also something that happens with people who take this program. Adrian, uh, started a flower farm a couple years ago after taking my program. It's called Little Button Farm. It's amazing. She's done amazing work. This year, she even told me she got a grant to have a geodesic dome on her site. So that's super exciting, um, and just really changed how she viewed her site, and how she's going to provide for her family going forward. Valerie, like, produced like a ridiculous amount of food in like the first or second year of implementation. So again, like, these people, this is why I love my clients. They go off and they do these amazing things. Um, well, thanks, buddy, for participating. And then Carlene, she started Wild Wiggins Homestead, and she now not only grows for herself. I know that some of you had also mentioned that you wanted to grow for other people. So she grows and brings her produce to the farmers market. So that's super exciting too. So I love all my clients and what they do. Jamie and Niall put in a water catchment system. Laura put in these beautiful swales because she was having all this flooding that was happening near her house. And now that flooding no longer occurs. The water is captured in these swales, and she's growing fruit trees along these swales. Kristen put in a rooftop garden. Samantha put in this amazing garden. One of my clients, Erica, this year, she put in an attached greenhouse that's attached to her barn. So again, all sorts of great successes while going through the program. And I'll send, as a follow-up, I have video testimonials from people who have also taken the program and have really benefited from it. So the value of this is $8,700. Obviously, knowing how to grow your own food, and I think being able to grow your own food in perpetuity, right, is priceless, right? I view it like food security is one of the biggest, and will become one of the bigger issues, right? As the climate is changing, as we're seeing, we saw that during the pandemic, right? Supply chains broke down. And so that's truly priceless. So the investment is 1650, or it's 4 payments of 415. And I've got a list of the people that joined tonight in person. If you join by this Friday, and class starts November 12th, but I have 2 bonuses. I have an extra one-on-one consultation session. So you'll get 3 consultation sessions with me rather than 2. and my new food forest ebook. Some of you may have seen it, but it's basically how do you design your cold climate food forest. I also actually want to, as I was starting this, I will also add as a bonus, I'll give you $100 off the 1650, so it'll be 1550 if you want to join. So that's my extra little bonus that I wanted to include tonight. So if you're interested, you can go to this this for more information. I will also include it in the chat. I think many of you may have already seen it, but if you do want more information about it, you can go to this website here that I'll include in the chat. And now I'd love to address any questions that you might have. You can also book a call with me, and I'll put that in the chat as well if you want to see if it's the right fit for you. Um, but again, you know, I've had people in one of the video testimonials, Brittany, saying, you know, it's totally worth it in terms of the investment because it's going to save you a bunch of time and money long term. But what questions? I'd love to address any questions you have just about your site planning process or about the program. I would love to take just, yeah, we can go until 7:30, the last 13 minutes to do that if people are interested in asking questions. And you can come off of mute or you can answer them in the chat as well. And I'll also put here, or you can put them in the chat and not answer them. Let me put the book a call. If you want to book a call with me, you can set that up too. Anybody have any questions related to soil, related to water? I'm here, I'm ready to answer. All right, you're welcome, Missy. Here's, if you want to book a call. Any other questions? If not, thank you all for participating. But I'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes. Ah, Flora, you got to run them, put the chickens to bed. Oh, great. Well, thank you all for participating. It's always lovely to spend time with people who want to grow more of their own food. So that always gives me a lot of encouragement and positivity. So thank you all for joining, and I will follow up with the replay for those of you who did not make it in person. And if you do want more information about the program, I'd love to have you join me. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.